Hi, it's story time. Dun dun dun. All right, today we have the travels of Dr. Dolittle. Here we go. That's Dr. Dolittle. Well, once upon a time there was a doctor named John Dolittle, and he was a doctor and he knew a lot. Dr. Dolittle lived in a little town in England called Puddleby on the Marsh. And when he walked down the street in his high hat, all the dogs and the cats and the cows and the horses and the pigs and the chickens and the sheep and the frogs and the turtles would run after him. Now, instead of doctoring people, Dr. Dolittle doctored animals. He was very fond of animals, and animals were very fond of him. They came to his house from everywhere so that he could take care of them. And then instead of going home again, they just stayed. And soon his house was filled with all kinds of animals, and there was barely enough room left for Dr. Dolittle himself. Dr. Dolittle gave names to some of his favorite pets. There was Dab Dab, the duck, and there was Jip, the dog, and Gub Gub, the pig, and Tutu, the owl, and Polynesia, the parrot. But the doctor had so many mice and canaries and hens and roosters and turtles and rabbits and hedgehogs and alligators and opossums and raccoons that he couldn't find names for them all. One rainy day, Polynesia the parrot said to Dr. Dolittle, "You have so many pets that you must learn to talk with them. So we will teach you animal language." And Dr. Dolittle sat down in front of a blackboard, and his pets gave him lessons, and soon he learned to talk with the animals, and soon he understood everything they said. See here it says moo means hello. Now one night, after the doctor had learned the animal's language, the door flew open and a monkey ran in. "Doctor," the monkey cried, "my name is Chi-Chi. I have come all the way from Africa to tell you about the monkeys. They have a terrible sickness, and they beg you to come to Africa to cure them. Will you do it, please?" "Of course I will," said Dr. Dolittle. So early the next morning, the doctor and Chi-Chi and Jip and Dab Dab and Gub Gub and Tutu and Polynesia the parrot all took their luggage down to the seashore. Dr. Dolittle got a boat from a sailor, and then they all went on board. For 6 weeks, they sailed on and on over the rolling sea, and when they got to the equator, they saw some flying fishes. The flying fishes said, "It is only 50 miles to Africa. You're almost there." But then a great storm came up with thunder and lightning, and the wind howled, and the rain poured down, and the waves slapped and splashed over the boat. And suddenly there was a big boom, and the ship stopped, and it rolled over on its side. "Dear me," said the doctor, "we must have run into Africa." "Get the rope," cried Polynesia. "Dab Dab, you take the end of the rope and fly to the shore. Fly it to a palm tree. And then those who can't swim could go down the rope until you get to the land." And that's how they all got safely to the shore. They all took shelter in a nice dry cave that they found up in the cliffs. And then suddenly Chi-Chi said, "Shh, I hear footsteps." They looked out and saw a soldier come out of the woods. He wore a mask over his face, and he carried a shield and a long, sharp spear. You must all come before the great king of the Jolly Jinky, he said. All these lands belong to him. Follow me. And when they had followed the soldier a little way through the forest, they saw the king's palace, and the king was sitting under an umbrella. You may not travel through my lands, he said. And then he told his soldiers, take the medicine man away, lock him and all his animals in my strongest prison. Okay. The prison had only one little window, and it was high up in the wall with bars across it. The prison door was strong and thick, and the walls were solid stone. Gub-Gub the pig began to cry, and even Dr. Dolittle looked worried. But Polynesia the parrot said, I'm small enough to get through the bars of this window. Tonight I'll creep through the bars, and I'll fly to the palace, and I'll find a way to make the king let you out. So that night the parrot flew to the palace, and she crept into the king's bedroom very softly and hid under the bed. I am Dr. Dolittle, said the parrot, just the way that Dr. Dolittle would have said it. You cannot see me. I have made myself invisible. Now listen. I warn you. You let me and my animals travel through your kingdom, or I will make you sick like the monkeys. Send your soldiers to open the prison door, or you shall have mumps before the morning sun comes up. And when he heard these words, the king began to tremble. He was scared. He jumped out of bed, and he told the soldiers to open the prison door. The doctor and all his animals rushed out of the prison, and they ran through the forest toward the land of the monkeys. They ran as fast as they could, but when the king found how he had been fooled by the parrot, he was dreadfully angry. He rushed around in his nightshirt, he woke up all of his army, and he sent them into the jungle to catch the doctor. Chi-Chi the monkey knew the paths through the jungle better than the king's soldiers did. He led the doctor and his pets through the thickest part of the forest, and he hid them in a big hollow tree. And Chi-Chi said, we must hide here while the soldiers are close by. Soon they will get tired and go back to bed. When the soldiers had all gone, Chi-Chi brought the doctor and his animals out of their hiding place. Then they set off for the land of the monkeys. And that very evening, they saw a lot of monkeys. They were sitting in the trees, looking and eagerly waiting. When they saw the famous doctor, the monkeys made a tremendous noise. They cheered and they waved and they swung on the branches to greet him. But the king's soldiers hadn't gone to bed. They were still following. They saw Dr. Dolittle. They ran to catch him, and the doctor and his animals ran harder than they had ever in their whole lives. They came to a high place with a river far below it. The land of the monkeys was on the other side. Chip the dog looked over the edge and almost fell. How are we going to get across, he asked. Then the leader of the monkeys, the biggest one of all, cried out to the others, boys, a bridge, quick, get lively, make a bridge, a bridge. And quick as a flash, the monkeys made themselves into a bridge. And they did it by holding hands and feet and tails. And they made a bridge of monkeys, and the big one shouted, walk over, all of you, walk across the bridge. And Dr. Dolittle and his pets were all a bit afraid. Such a narrow bridge, and so high above the river. But all of them got over safely, and the doctor was the last one to cross. Just as he reached the other side, the king's soldiers came rushing up behind them. They waved their swords, and they threw their spears, and they howled and they yowled, but they were too late. Dr. Dolittle and all his animals were safe in the land of the monkeys. The doctor found hundreds and thousands of very sick monkeys. He made all the monkeys come to be vaccinated. For 3 days and 3 nights, they came from the jungles, and they came from the valleys, and they came from the mountains and hills. They came to a little house of grass where the doctor sat all day and all night, vaccinating, vaccinating, and vaccinating. Vaccinating means you get a shot, and it helps you be healthy. And then very soon, the monkeys began to get better. By then, the doctor was all worn out. He was so tired that he went to bed and slept for 3 days and 3 nights without even turning over. When he woke up, Dr. Dolittle saw that none of the monkeys were sick anymore. They were all fixed. His vaccinations had cured them all. So he told them that he must go back to Puddleby on the Marsh. The monkeys were very surprised at this. They had hoped that the doctor would stay with them forever. So that night they got together to talk things over. One big one got up and said, "It is sad that Dr. Dolittle must leave us, but since he must go, let us give him a fine present." "If you really want to please him," Chi-Chi said, "give him an animal, one he has never seen before." "An iguana? No." "An okapi? No." "A push-me-pulley? A push-me-pull-you?" "Yes, no man has ever seen a push-me-pull-you. Let us give him a push-me-pull-you." Now, there aren't any push-me-pull-yous anymore. But then, when Dr. Dolittle was in Africa, there were still a few of them left. A push-me-pull-you had no tail. Instead, he had a head with horns both in front and behind. Push-me-pull-yous with their 2 heads were very hard to catch. When one head went to sleep, the other head was always awake and watching. This is why they were never caught, and they were never seen in any zoos. To catch a push-me-pull-you for the doctor, the monkeys made a plan. Very, very quietly, they set out through the forest to hunt. They found a place where they thought the push-me-pull-yous might be. Then they made a circle and joined hands, and the push-me-pull-you heard them, and he tried to break through the ring of monkeys, but he couldn't do it. He saw it was no use, so he sat down and asked them what they wanted. And they asked him if he would go home with Dr. Dolittle. The push-me-pull-you shook his head hard. "Certainly not," he said. For 3 days and 3 nights, the monkeys tried to persuade him. Then at last he said, "Oh, I will come with you and see what kind of man this doctor is." So the push-me-pull-you took one look at Dr. Dolittle, and he saw at once that the doctor was a very good man. And the push-me-pull-you said, "You have been most kind to all of the monkeys. I have made up my mind. I will go with you." Then the doctor and the doctor's animals and the push-me-pull-you started back to the seashore. The monkeys went with them to see them off. It took a long time to say farewell because there was hundreds and thousands of monkeys who wanted to shake the doctor by the hand and thank him for making them well again. Then the push-me-pull-you, Gub-Gub, Dab-Dab, Jip, Tutu, Polynesia, and Chi-Chi all went to the ship with the doctor. And soon they were out of sight of land, and the wide, wide sea looked terribly big and lonesome. And they lost their way. They had no more food, and there was no wind to fill the sails. And Dr. Dolittle said, "I'm afraid we are never going to get home." But then they heard a strange noise high in the air, and it grew louder and louder and louder. Birds! It was millions and millions of swallows flying fast. The swallows saw the ship, and they came down, and they swooped and skimmed over the water, and they took hold of the ropes with their feet, and away they flew, and they pulled the ship behind them. And now the doctor was traveling super fast. He had to hold on to his hat with both hands. The swallows flew on, and they pulled and they pulled, and they pulled the ship to England in almost no time at all. Now the winter sun was shining when the doctor got back to his own country. It was good to be home at last. Every night after supper, the doctor and his animals would sit around the big warm fire, and then the doctor would read aloud to them. He would read them the big book he was writing about their trip to faraway Africa. Africa, the land they would never forget, the land where the monkeys chattered in the palm trees, and the land where they found the wonderful Push Me Pull You. The end. The Travels of Dr. Dolittle.